After a long day at work, I was heading home, eager to celebrate my wife's birthday. Though exhausted, the thought of surprising Emily with the necklace hidden in my briefcase kept my mood uplifted. As I stepped into the house, laughter and conversation floated from the kitchen, where Emily and our daughter Sarah were engrossed in a lively discussion. "Honey, that big event you set up last night was phenomenal. I had no idea your friend was that skilled." "I want more," Emily's voice echoed, brimming with excitement, immediately grabbing my attention. Curious, I lingered in the hallway, staying out of sight, but within earshot. Emily's voice continued, filled with delight and an emotion I couldn't quite identify. He really caught me off guard. It was a total surprise. My heart pounded. Who was she talking about? My mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle. Then Sarah's young, earnest voice broke through my thoughts. "I knew you'd love it, Mom. He's perfect for you, unlike Dad. Perfect friend?" What did she mean? Confusion and suspicion washed over me as I tried to understand their conversation. It wasn't just the words, there was a deeper meaning I couldn't grasp. Quietly, I moved closer to the kitchen, my pulse racing with each step. Emily and Sarah were clearly sharing secrets, perhaps too intimate for me to hear, yet their words hung in the air, refusing to make sense. Memories of the past few weeks flashed through my mind, the odd late-night phone calls, Emily's sudden enthusiasm for dressing up for girls' nights out, and the subtle changes in Sarah's behavior when she thought I wasn't watching. Each moment now seemed like a piece of a puzzle, forming a picture I dreaded. Emily's laughter, which once brought me comfort, now felt tinged with suspicion. Were they planning something behind my back? Maybe a surprise party? Or was there more to this newfound admiration for a talented friend? I needed answers. Concrete proof before making any accusations. This was about more than just suspicion. It was about protecting my family's integrity and my trust in them. After what felt like an eternity, I quietly retreated, my mind swirling with questions and doubts. Determined to uncover the truth, I resolved to keep a close watch, gather evidence discreetly, and confront them only when I had undeniable proof. That night, as I lay in bed beside Emily, who slept peacefully, I stared at the ceiling, unable to shake the unsettling feeling that gnawed at me. The necklace in my briefcase felt like a heavy burden, a symbol of love overshadowed by doubt. Tomorrow, I told myself, tomorrow I would start seeking the truth. In the following days, I watched Emily and Sarah closely, scrutinizing their interactions with a new sense of vigilance. Every secretive glance, every whispered phone call, and every late-night outing became a piece of a puzzle, slowly revealing a truth I wasn't ready to face. One evening after Emily had gone to bed, I quietly slipped into the kitchen where her phone lay charging on the counter. The dim glow of the screen faintly lit the room as I cautiously unlocked it, my heart pounding as I scrolled through her messages, praying I was wrong. There it was, a series of messages from someone named Mark, messages that left little doubt. "You were amazing last night," read one. "I can't stop thinking about you." Read another. The words cut through me like shards of glass. My worst fears were confirmed. Emily was having an affair. Anger and hurt battled within me as I read more messages, each one revealing a side of my wife I never knew. How could she do this to me? And Sarah? What part did she play in all this? My hands trembled as I took screenshots of the incriminating messages, ensuring I had evidence to confront them both. The weight of betrayal settled heavily on my shoulders, but amidst the pain, a steely resolve took hold. The next day I confronted Sarah. She was in her room, buried in her textbooks, when I knocked softly on the door. "Dad?" She looked up, surprise and apprehension flickering in her eyes. "Sarah, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. She hesitated, then closed her laptop and gestured for me to sit beside her on the bed. "What's wrong, Dad?" I held up Emily's phone, showing the messages. "Do you want to explain this?" Sarah's face turned pale as she read the screen, her eyes widening in realization. Dad, I can explain." "Explain what, Sarah? That you're helping your mother cheat on me?" The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. "It's not like that, Dad," she protested, tears welling up in her eyes. "Mom, she was lonely. And Mark, he's just a friend." "A friend who sends her messages like these?" I retorted, my voice sharp. Sarah's shoulders slumped. "I thought I was helping her, Dad. She seemed so unhappy, and I wanted her to be happy again." My anger softened slightly as I saw the guilt and confusion etched on her face. She was just a young woman caught in the middle of her parents' crumbling marriage. "Sarah, I understand you wanted to help your mom," I said more gently. "But this isn't the way to do it. We need to talk to Mom together." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm really sorry, Dad. I never wanted any of this to happen." "I understand, Sarah," I said, resting a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "But we need to face this situation together." That evening, Emily returned from work, completely unaware of the brewing storm. Sarah and I sat silently in the living room, our serious expressions greeting her as she walked in, causing her smile to falter. "What's going on?" Emily asked cautiously, setting her bag down. I stood up and extended her phone toward her. "We need to have a talk." Emily's eyes darted between me and Sarah, her confusion quickly morphing into alarm as she noticed the screenshots on the phone. "Jim, what is this?" "You tell me, Emily," I responded, my voice calm despite the emotional chaos within. "Who is Mark?" Emily's face turned ashen, her hands trembling as she took the phone. "Jim, it's not what you think." "Then explain it to me," I demanded, my tone growing firmer. Emily glanced at Sarah, who sat beside me with her eyes cast down. "Sarah, maybe you should—" "No, Mom," Sarah interrupted, her voice unexpectedly firm. "Dad deserves the truth." Emily sighed deeply, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "Jim, he's just a friend. It's a bit more complicated than that." "Complicated?" I repeated, incredulous. "How complicated can it be, Emily?" "These messages I know," Emily admitted, tears forming in her eyes. "I made a huge mistake, Jim. I never intended for any of this to happen. But it did happen," I said quietly. "And now we have to face it." The room fell into a heavy silence, the weight of betrayal thick in the air. Emily and I locked eyes, unspoken words passing between us. The marriage we had built over the years was now coming apart. "I need some time to think," I finally said, turning away from Emily's pleading eyes. "I'll be staying at John's for a while." Emily nodded silently, her eyes brimming with tears. As I passed by, Sarah reached out to touch my arm, her face a mix of sorrow and regret. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered. I managed a weak smile, gently squeezing her hand before walking out of the house. As I drove to John's, my emotions were in turmoil, anger, sadness, and a profound sense of loss. Yet amidst it all, a determination took hold. I couldn't let this betrayal define me or destroy our family. The truth was out, and now I needed a plan to confront Emily, decide the fate of our marriage, and protect Sarah from the fallout of our broken trust. One evening, unable to bear the weight of deception any longer, I entered the kitchen where Emily and Sarah were deep in conversation. The clink of glasses and the faint aroma of dinner hung in the air, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. As they turned to see me standing there, shock registered on their faces, sensing the gravity of the moment. "What's going on?" I demanded, my voice revealing both hurt and anger. Silence enveloped the room, thick and suffocating. Emily's eyes darted between me and Sarah, searching for words to justify the betrayal. Sarah shifted uncomfortably, her guilt evident even in the dim kitchen light. "It's not what you think, Jim," Emily finally managed, her voice trembling with fear and desperation. I held up a hand to stop her. "Don't! Just don't!" Turning away from their stunned silence, I walked out of the kitchen, leaving their pleas unanswered. The truth was out, and with it came a clarity that demanded action. In the solitude of my study, I sank into my chair, emotions roiling within me. Betrayal, hurt, and a deep-seated resolve collided in a tumultuous storm. I needed a plan, a way to navigate through the shards of our shattered marriage and salvage what remained of our family. My thoughts turned to John, my best friend and confidant. He had been a steadfast presence throughout this ordeal, offering counsel and support when I needed it most. Without hesitation, I picked up the phone and dialed his number, knowing he would grasp the gravity of the situation. "Hey, Jim, what's up?" John's voice, usually cheerful, carried a note of concern. "John, I need to talk to you," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "Of course, buddy. Come over," John replied, sensing the urgency in my tone. Minutes later, I found myself in John's living room, the weight of my confession heavy on my shoulders. I recounted everything: Emily's affair, Sarah's unwitting involvement, and the confrontation that had left me reeling with a mix of anger and hurt. John listened intently, his expression serious. Jim, I'm so sorry you're going through this. But what do you want to do now? I need to confront them, I replied, my jaw clenched with determination. But not just that. I need to make them understand the consequences of their actions. John nodded thoughtfully. What are you thinking? A plan began to form in my mind. A plan that would turn Emily's upcoming birthday into a reckoning, a moment of truth that would force her to face the fallout of her betrayal. Oh, wait, I said finally, the pieces falling into place. It'll wait until her birthday and then… David's eyebrow shot up, sensing the determination in my voice. And what happens after that? Then I'll give her a gift she'll never forget, I replied, my words dripping with bitterness. The subsequent days blurred into a mix of anticipation and meticulous planning. I maintained an outward appearance of normalcy, even though the tension between Emily and me simmered just beneath the surface. Sarah, caught in the crossfire of our strained interactions, withdrew into a silence that spoke volumes. As Emily's birthday drew near, I meticulously prepared. I arranged for the divorce papers to be drawn up and discreetly placed them where they could be easily found at the right moment, ready to deliver the final blow. On the night before her birthday, I watched Emily sleep, her features softened by the peacefulness of slumber. The woman I had loved, trusted and built a life with now, seemed like a stranger, her betrayal etched into every line on her face. The morning of her birthday arrived, carrying a weight I could no longer shoulder alone. With a heavy heart, I made up my mind. That evening, amid the flickering candles and the warmth of gathered friends, I handed Emily a beautifully wrapped box. Her eyes sparkled with anticipation as she untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Instead of the expected jewelry or cherished keepsake, the harsh reality of our fractured marriage lay inside divorce papers, neatly folded and waiting. Emily's smile faltered, her fingers trembling as she picked up the papers. Confusion turned to disbelief, and then to dawning horror as she read the words that sealed our fate. Jim, what is this? Her voice quivered, eyes wide with shock. Happy birthday, Emily, I said quietly, my voice devoid of the warmth it once held. Consider this my gift to you. The room fell silent, the air thick with tension as our friends exchanged uncertain glances. Emily looked up at me, tears brimming in her eyes. You can't be serious, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. I'm completely serious, I replied, my tone unwavering. This is the consequence of your actions, Emily. Sarah stood nearby, her face a mask of guilt and remorse. Dad, please, she pleaded. Not now, Sarah, I said, my gaze fixed on Emily. This is between your mother and me. Emily's hands shook as she clutched the papers, her voice trembling with emotion. Jim, please, let's talk about this. There's nothing left to talk about, I said, my resolve hardening. I trusted you, Emily. We trusted you. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving Emily to face the repercussions of her choices. The party dissolved into whispers and murmurs, friends offering hesitant condolences as they left one by one. Alone in the quiet aftermath, I packed a bag and left the house, the weight of my decision settling heavily on my shoulders. As I drove away, I saw Sarah standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. I couldn't bear to look back. Following the confrontation on Emily's birthday, I found solace in the unwavering support of my friend John. He had been my rock throughout the ordeal, offering counsel and strength when I needed it most. Together we devised a plan, a meticulously crafted strategy to confront Emily and ensure justice was served. John's living room transformed into our war room, scattered with legal papers, timelines, and damning evidence of Emily's infidelity. As we pored over messages and receipts, the reality of our task became clear, the dissolution of a marriage that had once held so much promise, now tainted by betrayal. We need to be strategic about this, Jim, John said, his brow furrowed in concentration. We have to make sure Emily comprehends the gravity of her actions. I nodded grimly, my mind racing with the details of our plan. The divorce papers need to be airtight, no room for loopholes, and the timing, it has to be impeccable. John tapped his pen against the table, deep in thought. Well, file for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and infidelity. The evidence is strong enough to support our case. As we drafted the legal documents, every word carried weight. a testament to the betrayal that had shattered our lives. John's legal expertise proved invaluable, guiding me through the complex maze of proceedings with the clarity I desperately needed. We also need to consider custody arrangements for Sarah, John suggested, his voice gentle yet practical. She's caught in the middle of this, and we have to prioritize her well-being. My heart clenched at the mention of Sarah. She had unwittingly been drawn into her mother's affair, torn between loyalty to her parents and the devastating truth she now faced. I made a silent vow to protect her from the fallout as much as possible. Days turned into nights as we finalized our plan, each moment spent preparing for the inevitable confrontation. The weight of impending change hung heavy in the air, a storm gathering momentum as Emily remained oblivious to the tempest about to break. On the eve of our next move, I found myself standing outside our home, gazing up at the familiar windows bathed in soft lamplight. Inside, Emily was likely going about her evening, unaware of the storm brewing just beyond her reach. I steeled myself with resolve as I entered the house, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway. Emily was in the kitchen, her back turned to me as she prepared dinner. The sight of her, so familiar yet now tainted by betrayal, stirred conflicting emotions within me. "Jim," she greeted me cautiously, her voice tinged with apprehension. "We need to talk." I met her eyes, my tone clipped and short. Emily turned fully to face me, worry etched deeply into her features. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her voice shaky. "No, Emily, things are far from okay," I responded, my voice barely masking the anger simmering beneath. "We need to discuss what happens next." She hesitated, her gaze searching mine for answers she was afraid to find. "Jim, can't we work through this?" she pleaded. I shook my head, the weight of our broken trust pressing heavily on my shoulders. "There's nothing left to work out, Emily. Not after what I've discovered." Her shoulders sagged, a silent acknowledgement of her guilt. "I never meant to hurt you, Jim. I was just lost." "Lost?" I echoed, bitterness creeping into my voice. "Is that what you call it? From my perspective, it looks like you made a deliberate choice. A choice to betray our marriage." Emily's eyes filled with tears, her voice barely a whisper. "I know I made a terrible mistake, but please don't do this. This isn't just about you and me anymore," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil within. "It's about trust and honesty, and right now, we have none." The conversation hung between us, heavy with unspoken truths and shattered dreams. I turned away, unable to bear the sight of her pain any longer. "I've spoken to my lawyer," I finally said, my words measured. "We're filing for divorce." Emily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. "Jim, please don't do this." "My mind is made up," I said firmly, my resolve unyielding. "It's over, Emily." With that, I walked out of the kitchen, leaving Emily standing alone amidst the wreckage of our marriage. Outside, the night air was cool against my skin, a stark contrast to the heat of emotions raging inside me. Back at John's, we finalized the last details of our plan. The divorce papers were ready, meticulously prepared to ensure a swift and decisive end to our marriage. Every legal loophole was closed, every contingency accounted for. "It's done," John said, handing me the final documents. "Are you sure about this, Jim?" I nodded, my jaw set with determination. "It's the only way forward, John, for both of us." The next morning, I returned home to find Emily in the living room, her eyes redrimmed from tears. Sarah hovered nearby, torn between her loyalty to both parents. "Jim," Emily said softly, her voice trembling with emotion, "please, can't we talk this through?" "There's nothing left to discuss, Emily," I replied, my tone gentle yet resolute. "The papers are all ready with my lawyer." Emily's face crumpled in despair, the weight of reality crashing down around us. "I never meant to hurt you, Jim. Please believe me." "I did believe you," I said quietly, my heart heavy with sorrow. "But trust is earned, Emily, and right now, I can't trust you." Sarah stepped forward, her voice wavering with emotion. "Dad, please don't do this. I don't want us to fall apart." I knelt beside her, taking her hands in mine. "Sarah, this isn't about you. Your mom and I, we have to figure things out." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I love you both." "I love you too, Sarah," I said softly, pulling her into a tight embrace. "And no matter what happens, that will never change." As I stood up, I met Emily's gaze, seeing the pain and regret etched in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Emily," I said quietly, but I have to do what's best for me now. With that, I left the house, leaving behind the shattered remnants of a life that once held promise. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges yet to come. But amidst the rubble of broken trust, a flicker of hope burned within me, a hope for a future rebuilt on honesty and healing. The day of Emily's birthday arrived with an uneasy tension hanging over our home. The usual bustle of preparations felt hollow against the backdrop of impending revelation. Guests arrived throughout the evening, their cheerful greetings a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within. I watched from a distance as Emily mingled with friends, her smile strained and brittle. Sarah hovered nearby, her eyes flickering between her mother and me, sensing the unspoken tension that threatened to spill over at any moment. As the evening progressed, I found myself drawn to the outskirts of the gathering, unable to engage in the facade of celebration. John's reassuring presence at my side was a lifeline, a silent reminder of the plan we had meticulously crafted. "It's time," John murmured, his voice barely audible over the din of conversation. I nodded, steeling myself for the confrontation that would redefine this evening. With measured steps, I approached Emily, who stood near the center of the room, her back to the crowd. "Emily," I said quietly, causing her to turn towards me, her expression a mix of apprehension and confusion. "Jim," she replied cautiously, her gaze searching mine for answers she feared to find. "I have something for you," I said evenly, holding out a beautifully wrapped box. Her brow furrowed in uncertainty as she accepted the gift, fingers tracing the ribbon with hesitant movements. The room seemed to hold its breath as Emily untied the bow and lifted the lid, revealing the contents within. Her breath caught in her throat as she pulled out the divorce papers, stark and unyielding in their finality. The color drained from her face, replaced by a stunned silence that echoed through the room. What is this?" Emily stammered, her voice shaking as she glanced up at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Happy birthday, Emily," I said icily, my words slicing through the air. "Consider this my gift to you." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room as the reality of the situation hit our guests. Friends exchanged puzzled looks, uncertain how to react to the unfolding drama. Some looked at Emily with sympathy, while others turned to me with a mix of shock and curiosity. Emily's hands trembled as she gripped the papers, her voice barely a whisper. "Jim, please, this isn't the right moment or place." "There's no better time than now," I retorted, my tone void of any warmth. "You brought this on yourself, Emily." Tears welled in her eyes, a turbulent mix of anger and fear swirling within them. "You can't just do this." "I can," I said firmly, my resolve unshakable. "And I have." The room fell silent once more, our words hanging in the air like a dense fog. Emily scanned the room, searching for support but finding only a sea of faces reflecting the gravity of our broken marriage. Sarah approached hesitantly, her voice quivering with emotion. "Dad, please don't do this." I turned to her, my heart breaking at the sight of my daughter caught in the middle of our fractured family. "Sarah, I'm sorry you have to see this, but your mother and we can't continue like this." Emily turned to Sarah, her voice pleading. "Sweetheart, go to your room. This is between your father and me." Sarah hesitated, torn between her loyalty to both parents. "Mom, Sarah, please," Emily urged, tears streaming down her face. "Just go." Reluctantly, Sarah nodded and retreated from the room, leaving behind a palpable sense of sorrow and regret. I watched her go, my heart heavy with the weight of my decision. Turning back to Emily, I found her staring at me with a mix of defiance and resignation. "You've made your point, Jim. Is this really what you want?" "It's what's necessary," I replied evenly, my voice softening despite the turmoil inside me. "For both of us." Emily's shoulders slumped, the fight draining from her as she folded the papers and placed them on a nearby table. "I never thought it would come to this." "Neither did I admitted, the ache in my chest unrelenting. "But here we are." The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of strained conversations and awkward goodbyes. Guests left one by one, offering sympathetic murmurs and hesitant pats on the shoulder. John stayed by my side throughout, a pillar of support amidst the wreckage of our shattered lives. As the last guest departed, I found myself alone with Emily in the silence of our home. The air was thick with unspoken words and shattered dreams, a stark reminder of the love we had once shared. "I'm sorry, Emily," I said quietly, breaking the heavy silence between us. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I'm sorry too, Jim. For everything. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving Emily to confront the aftermath of our betrayal alone. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges yet to come. But amidst the rubble of broken trust, a flicker of hope burned within me, a hope for a future rebuilt on honesty and healing. As I packed my bags, my daughter burst into my room, tears streaming down her face. Dad, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I sighed, pausing in my packing to look at her with a mix of sadness and resignation. Sarah, it's not just about apologies now. There are consequences to our actions, and we all have to face them. She approached me cautiously, reaching out to touch my arm. Please don't leave, Dad. We can work through this. I shook my head gently. I need some time to think, Sarah. It's not just about what happened. It's about trust and rebuilding that. Her lower lip trembled, and she blinked back tears. But Mom is devastated. Can't we talk about this as a family? I wish it were that simple, I murmured, my voice strained. Right now, I need to process everything. I'll be staying with John for a while. Sarah nodded, her expression crestfallen. I understand. Just don't shut us out completely, Dad. I won't, I assured her, placing a hand on her shoulder. I love you, Sarah. That will never change. With a heavy heart, I resumed packing, ignoring the ache in my chest as I prepared to leave the home that once felt like the center of our family's world. Sarah lingered in the doorway, watching silently as I gathered my belongings. After what felt like an eternity, I zipped up my suitcase and lifted it off the bed. Turning to Sarah, I managed a small, sad smile. Take care of Mom, okay? She nodded silently, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. I will. Leaving my daughter standing there, I made my way downstairs. Emily was in the living room, her eyes re-dimmed from crying. She looked up as I entered, a mixture of hurt and regret etched on her face. Jim, she began, her voice breaking. I held up a hand, cutting off her words. Emily, we need time apart. This isn't easy for either of us. She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. I never wanted to hurt you, Jim. Please believe me. I know, I said softly, my heart aching at the pain in her eyes. But trust is something that takes time to rebuild. Emily reached out tentatively, as if wanting to touch me, but stopped herself. What happens now? I'm going to stay with John for a while, I explained gently. We both need space to figure things out. Emily's shoulders sagged, the weight of our fractured marriage visible in every line of her face. I don't know if I can do this on my own. You're stronger than you realize, I said, trying to instill confidence in her. Look after Sarah. We'll figure out the rest as we go along. With that, I turned and walked toward the door, pausing only briefly to glance back at Emily. She stood there, a solitary figure in the dim light, her eyes following me with a mixture of longing and resignation. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, I inhaled deeply, trying to steady my emotions. The journey ahead was uncertain, but amidst the pain and sorrow, a glimmer of hope flickered, a hope for healing, understanding, and ultimately, forgiveness. The divorce proceedings were grueling, filled with high emotions on both sides. Emily fought fiercely, trying to manipulate the terms in her favor. But with John's unwavering support, I remained resolute and focused on a fair resolution. This isn't easy, Jim, John remarked one evening over dinner at his place. But you're doing the right thing by standing firm through all of this. I nodded, pushing my food around my plate without much appetite. I just want it to be over, for everyone's sake. John placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. It will be soon. Hang in there. Months passed in a blur of legal consultations, paperwork, and tense negotiations. Each day brought new challenges, but I found solace in routine and the steadfast support of friends like John, who kept me grounded amid the storm. One sunny afternoon, as I sorted through boxes in my new apartment, a sense of peace settled over me. The divorce papers had been finalized that morning, marking the end of a painful chapter in my life. I took a deep breath, savoring the quiet and the freedom to chart my own course. A knock on the door startled me out of my thoughts. I opened it to find Sarah standing there, hesitating on the threshold. "Dad," she said softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside, inviting her in with a nod. She entered cautiously, glancing around the unfamiliar space. "Nice place," she commented, trying to break the tension. Thanks, I replied, gesturing for her to take a seat. What brings you here, Sarah? She fidgeted with her hands, searching for the right words. I wanted to apologize for everything that happened. I sat down opposite her, studying her face. It wasn't just you, Sarah. We all played a part. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I should have been more honest with you. Mom, too. We all make mistakes, I said gently, reaching out to squeeze her hand. What matters now is how we move forward. Sarah nodded again, her shoulders sagging with relief. I've missed you, Dad. Things haven't been the same without you. I've missed you too, I admitted, a lump forming in my throat. But I needed time to sort things out. She nodded understandingly. Are you okay now? I smiled, though it felt bittersweet. I'm getting there. It's a process. We talked for hours that afternoon, catching up on the months we had spent apart. Sarah shared stories about school and her plans for the future. I listened, grateful for the chance to reconnect with my daughter. As evening fell, Sarah stood up to leave, hesitating at the door. Dad, she began tentatively, do you think we can try to be a family again? I considered her words carefully, feeling a glimmer of hope stir within me. I think we can try, I said finally, a weight lifting off my chest. She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. Thank you, Dad, for giving me another chance. Thank you for coming, I replied sincerely. Let's take it one step at a time. With that, Sarah left, leaving me standing in the doorway, filled with a newfound sense of optimism. The road ahead would be challenging, but as I closed the door behind her, I knew that together, we could navigate whatever lay ahead. As the months went by, I focused on healing and rebuilding my life. John remained by my side, offering support and encouragement as I navigated the challenges of starting over. Together, we explored new hobbies and reconnected with old friends, finding moments of joy amid the recovery process. One crisp autumn morning, I sat on the porch of my new home, sipping coffee and watching the leaves rustle in the breeze. The air was fresh with promise, and I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Jim, John called from across the yard, walking over with a smile. You look like a new man. I chuckled, gesturing for him to join me. Feels like it sometimes. It's been quite a journey. John nodded knowingly, taking a seat beside me. You've come a long way since everything happened. Yeah, I agreed, reflecting on the challenges and growth. I never thought I'd be here starting over. You deserve this, John said sincerely, clapping me on the shoulder. You've handled everything with grace and strength. I smiled gratefully, appreciating his words more than he knew. Thanks, John. I couldn't have done it without you. We sat in companionable silence for a while, soaking in the peaceful surroundings. The past felt distant now, a chapter closed but not forgotten. I had learned valuable lessons about trust, resilience, and the importance of self-care. Later that evening, I received a call from Sarah. Her voice was tentative yet hopeful as she apologized once more for the pain she had caused. We talked for a long time, sharing our hopes and fears and slowly rebuilding our fractured relationship. In the weeks that followed, Emily reached out as well, expressing regret and a desire to find closure. We met for coffee, keeping the conversation light yet honest, acknowledging the past without dwelling on it. It was a step towards forgiveness and acceptance, allowing us both to move forward with peace in our hearts. With each passing day, I felt lighter, freer. The weight of resentment and hurt began to lift, replaced by a renewed sense of optimism and possibility. I immersed myself in work, taking on new projects and challenges with newfound enthusiasm. One afternoon, as I sorted through old photographs in my study, I stumbled upon a picture of our family from happier times. I smiled wistfully, tracing the faces of Emily and Sarah with fondness. Despite the pain of the past, I cherished the memories we had shared. Looking ahead, I knew that rebuilding trust would take time, but I was willing to invest in the future. With John's encouragement, I considered joining a local community group, eager to connect with others and give back to the community that had supported me during tough times. As the seasons changed and winter melted into spring, I found myself looking forward to what lay ahead. Life was far from perfect, but I had found a sense of peace and purpose in the journey of rebuilding. I was ready to embrace the future, leaving the past where it belonged behind me.